I mean, it's just so tasty. You know, you can open up that king, get after him. Well, Firouzja couldn't resist. Welcome back to Chess Dog. I'm John, and today we have a sacrificial tactical melee between Alireza Firouzja and Levon Aronian from the Sink-Failed Cup. An amazing game. Let's jump right in. Alireza has white, he plays e4. Levon Aronian has black, he plays e5. And we quickly get the Italian game, one of Alireza Firouzja's favorite lines when he plays e4. Bishop to c5, d3, knight f6. And here he plays the move h3. Perhaps he can later expand with g4, keeps a piece out of g4. The main move here is c3, but h3 is what he played. He likes to play things a little differently. Castles, knight to c3. So he doesn't play c3 at all. He brings his pieces out as quickly as possible. This knight can go to e2, g3, hop into d5. The downside is this bishop at c4 has nowhere to run, and Aronian immediately takes advantage of that with knight to a5, hitting the bishop, and the bishop can't tuck away. And what Firouzja does, he plays a novelty. He plays the move a3, which seems strange. It's a little late to allow the bishop to run. A more common move is, say, knight to e5. The pawn is hanging, but after queen to e7, you sack twice on f7. Not really a sack. And in this position, you've got a rook and two pawns for two minor pieces. The computers say it's equal. But after a3, Aronian is going to just take the bishop, right? That was the whole point of knight to a5 in the first place, right? And then pawn takes. So here's the position. Firouzja has a real clamp down on this d5 square, two pawns and the knight at c3. But the pawn at e5 is hanging, so Aronian plays d6, the most natural move on the board, but now bishop to g5. And this pin can be very annoying. And since Aronian played d6, this bishop at c5 can't tuck back to e7 to relieve the pressure from that pin. So bishop e6 was played, hitting the c4 pawn, and now queen to d3. He doesn't defend with b3, but plays queen to d3. He could castle either direction here. h6, bishop h4, and here Aronian plays g5, and that's the way people are playing these days. He's castled on the king side. Firouzja has not castled at all, yet he's advancing the pawns in front of his king. It's the way of modern chess, encouraged by computers, no doubt, and computers do like this idea for black. But you're looking at this position, and I got to tell you, when I see this kind of position, I cannot resist sacrificing on g5. I mean, it's just so tasty. You know, you can open up that king, get after him. Well, Firouzja couldn't resist either, and he sacrifices with knight takes g5, pawn takes knight, bishop takes g5. And this pin is very annoying for black. He's got a piece for two pawns, but white can generate a lot of pressure in this position. King to g7, this is a process that black uses to try to relieve the pressure on this knight. He moves the king up, maybe even to g6. The rook could come over, and he can follow in that process. So if Firouzja wants to open up the lines towards that knight as quickly as he can, he immediately plays f4. The idea is he can play the rook to f1 and perhaps open up and attack that knight. So Aronian takes on f4 first, and now knight to e2. And look at all the tools that Firouzja has to attack this f6 knight. He can play knight f4, h5. The queen can move to c3. Very nervous. Now, the computers have a defense here, and that's the move queen to e7. After rook f1, king to g6, you allow e5 check, and then the king takes bishop, and you go like this. But look at where this king is. What human being is going to play a game where you put your king on g5 in this position? Not many. And Aronian does not play queen to e7. He plays c6, potentially breaking here, helping to control the d5 square. b4 hits the bishop at c5, and the bishop comes to e3. Helps defend f4, and also interferes with the queen's communication along the third rank. Rook to f1, piling on the pressure, hoping to break through. Now king to g6, and h4, defending the bishop that was attacked by the king. And there are some potential attacks with e5 check. At the moment, black could interpose with that bishop, but the threat is looming and is dangerous, and Levon wants to get rid of the threat as quickly as possible, so he gives the piece back with bishop takes c4 and queen takes bishop. And, I mean, this is a crazy, crazy position. Both kings are unsafe. The play is wild. d5 was played, and here, if Firouzja had taken on d5, Queen takes d5, queen to c3, attacking the knight. Knight comes into e4. And then there's queen takes e3. A queen sack, but very temporary, because after the queen is captured, knight to f4 check forks the king and the queen. But the truth be told, when white ends up capturing the queen, the advantage isn't that great. It's a little bit of an advantage, but not much of one. What Firouzja does is play queen to b3. Again, putting some pressure on this e3 bishop. Rook goes to e8, attacking e4. And now bishop takes f4. He could take with the knight. That was a possibility. And then take with the rook. Knight e4. Bishop takes d8, but he's not losing the queen because of this discovery. Knight to c5 check. The rook checks. The knight attacks the queen. After king d2, knight b3, cb3, rook a to d8. To my eye, black looks fine here. Computers like white a little bit, though, because of this outside past h-pawn. But it's probably a game that would be a drawn endgame, most likely, between players of this level. But Firouzja takes with the bishop on f4. Bishop takes, knight takes f4, check. Hits the king, king to h7, and now long castling. Firouzja waited a long time to castle. He often waits a long time to castle. And we can just look really at king safety, because that's the main issue here. Remember, Firouzja sacrificed that piece on g5, but then he recovered a piece later. And black's king is just much less safe. And there's a lot of attacking potential in the position. Knight takes e4. Now, this looks pretty nice. The knight on e4. But here, Firouzja did miss an opportunity that the computers show us. He could have taken on d5 with the knight. The knight's threatening to come into f6, and if the knight recaptures, the queen would actually take on f7, and black would quickly be mated. So after pawn takes knight, rook f7 check, king h6, rook d5, hits the queen. The rook is protected by the queen at b3. Queen h4, queen to e3 check, king g6, queen f3, and a potential line check, block with the rook, queen to h6 check, then the king goes to b1, after queen g5, rook d to d7, and black is not going to survive this. Rook to g7 check, winning the queen is only one of many threats on the board. But Firouzja does not take on d5. He plays a more natural move, more human move, knight to e2. Now knight to d6 is played by Aronian, helping to control c4 a little bit. The knight could hop in there and give this white king some problems. Queen to d3 check. King to h8. If he blocks with f5, then the exchange sacrifice is quite effective here. Knight takes, queen f5 check, king h6, and knight to g3. And black's king is under a lot of pressure. The queen can check on h5 and cause trouble that way. So he plays king to h8. Queen to d4 check, king h7, and now knight to g3. The idea is the knight can go to h5 and threaten mate on g7. The queen goes to b6, offering a trade of queens. Firouzja does not want to trade queens. When your opponent's king is in trouble, you want to keep pieces on the board, not exchange them, of course. So queen to d3 check. White attacks forcefully, king to g8. Now, in this position, Aronian is threatening rook to e3, which attacks the queen and the knight simultaneously. So Firouzja plays knight to f5, controlling e3 and offering an exchange of knights. This knight is actually a pretty effective defensive piece. It defends f7, controls key squares. So the knights get exchanged off, queen takes f5. So Firouzja is threatening to capture on f7 with check. Queen goes to e3, king to b1, and now queen to e6. This is the process that Aronian used to defend the f7 pawn. Perhaps slightly better was rook to e7, but after queen g4 check, king to f8, white still has a lot of pressure on the position. Queen to f2, again, saving his queen. He does not want to exchange queens. And here Aronian plays a5. A natural move. He would love to take on b4 and open up the a file for this rook, activate it, and then white's king would be in quite a bit of trouble. So rook to d3 was played. That threatens rook to g3 check. In some lines, it even threatens rook to e3 to distract the queen from f7. And here, Aronian plays a b4, as he planned when he played a5. Turns out a bit tougher defense was f6. And after rook to f8, rook to f3, rook to f8, pawn takes pawn, And in this position, black is still surviving, although white is better. But after ab4, Firouzja does not waste time. Rook to g3, check. King to f8, and now rook to f3. A rare tripling of heavy pieces on a half-open file. King moves to g8, and that turns out to be a mistake. Rook to e7 was a little bit better, although after queen to d4, threatening mate on h8, the attack would continue. But after king to g8, Firouzja can go ahead and capture on f7, which he does, and he's threatening queen to g3 check, followed by queen to g7 mate here. Rook takes a3, controls the g3 square, so that mate can't take place immediately. But he plays rook to f8 check, king to h7, and queen to f7 check. And Aronian resigned here. But let's see why. After queen takes queen, rook 1 f7 check, king to g6, and it looks like black is doing okay, because if white takes that rook, then this king can just capture that rook, restoring the material equality. But the problem is that what white would do is play h5 check, kicking the king away from that rook. And then when the king takes the pawn, now you take the rook, and there is no recapture, and an extra rook with decisive material advantage. Now, this game was a tactical melee with sacrifices, but if you want to see a positional masterpiece from Alireza Firouzja, be sure to check out this next video here. I don't think you're going to be disappointed. See you again soon.